Why is it that native speakers spend their entire lives speaking a language, yet they still make baffling mistakes sometimes? For example, native English speakers will often confuse it's without an apostrophe with it's with an apostrophe. Native Spanish speakers might accidentally add an extra S onto the preterite tu form of verb, saying, for example, comprastes instead of compraste. It physically pains me to say comprastes. Native Mandarin speakers will often confuse 白少的, 双人的, and tuye de. In fact, just a couple of days ago, I was browsing RedNote and came across a perfect example of this, where the sentence 头发梳的超级紧, the de should be 双人的, not 白少的. So in this video, we will investigate why native speakers make these sorts of mistakes. One big reason is the difference between listening and speaking versus reading and writing. Whenever we listen to a language or speak it, we're not thinking about the spelling because spelling doesn't matter. And that means that our recognition of incorrect spelling and production of incorrect spelling may increase. There's a phenomenon of this that is called eggcorn. So the story goes that people were misspelling acorn as eggcorn because they sound very similar but are spelled very differently. And this phenomenon applies to not just words, but entire phrases. For example, for all intensive purposes instead of for all intents and purposes. Dog-eat-dog world instead of dog-eat-dog world. Another big thing is autocorrect. So there's nothing wrong with using autocorrect by itself, but there's a difference between knowing the correct spelling, but accidentally misspelling something due to typing on a small keyboard or typing quickly, and then not knowing the correct spelling and intentionally using autocorrect in order to account for your ignorance. When we use computers to outsource our own thinking, it means that we become sloppier thinkers and worse thinkers because of it. So there's an elephant in a room that I haven't talked about, which is the fact that everybody makes mistakes. We all know this. No one's perfect. No human is fallible. And wait, no. No human is infallible, not fallible. Everyone makes mistakes. And even though native speakers are great speakers, they're still mere mortals like the rest of us. So it's not that we don't expect native speakers to make mistakes. It's that native speakers make different mistakes from the ones that non-natives make. If we look at my example with the Spanish example I gave, where native speakers might accidentally say comprastes instead of compraste, if you make that mistake, either you're a complete beginner who messed up your conjugations, or you're a native speaker. There's no in between there. And all of this comes down to the fact that human beings are great at recognizing patterns, but bad at doing logic. This is what helped us in our hunter-gatherer days. Let's say every spring a fruit appears on a tree. So judging from that pattern, we know that the next time spring rolls around, the fruit will probably appear on that tree. It helps us to avoid, let's say, eating a poisonous plant. We have this sort of uncanny valley feeling where we know that something is off, but can't put our finger down on what it is. Recognizing faces as well is a prime example of humans recognizing patterns. And although humans are great at recognizing patterns, at some point, it starts working against us. We start seeing shapes in clouds even where there aren't any shapes. We might see a face on Mars even though it's just the product of shadows. We may always think that correlation always means causation. We see meaning where there is no meaning. In one of Neil deGrasse Tyson's books, he says that, "I am convinced that the act of thinking logically cannot possibly be natural to the human mind. If it were, then mathematics would be everybody's easiest course at school, and our species would not have taken several millennia to figure out the scientific method. Logical fallacies, formal and informal alike, have to be taught to us. They don't come naturally. And even upon learning them, we can still fall victim to them." A great example of this is the following logical sequence. If it rains, then the street will be wet. Therefore, if it doesn't rain, then the street will not be wet. This may seem completely logical, but it is not valid, because even though it doesn't rain, the street could still be wet due to someone kicking over a bucket or a fire hydrant exploding. Humans are so bad at doing logic because we have a flood of information that's coming in from our senses, and we're not calculators or computers in the same way that machines are. Okay, so what does any of this have to do with language? Well, I will show that grammar is logical. So if humans are great at recognizing patterns, but bad at doing logic, and grammar is based on logic, then that means that humans are bad at doing logic. I'm not really saying anything new here because there is an entire field of computer science dedicated to this sort of stuff. But let's give an example and play a game. Suppose that you have these following, we're going to call them substitution rules. If you have a sentence, you can convert that sentence into a noun phrase and a verb phrase. If you have a noun phrase, you can change that into a determiner and a noun. Or you can change that noun phrase into a determiner, adjective, or noun. Or a determiner, noun, prepositional phrase. If you have a verb phrase, you can change that into a verb and noun phrase. Or a verb, noun phrase, prepositional phrase. Or just a verb and adverb. If you have a prepositional phrase, you can turn that into a preposition and noun phrase. If you have an adjective, you can duplicate the adjective. And your job is to create the correct grammar that would align with this sentence. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. To make this easier, just treat jumps over as a single verb. So if you start a sentence, what production rules would you create in order to create the grammar of this sentence? I'll give you a second to think about it. Okay, a second is up. So the way you do this is you start a sentence and you convert this into a noun phrase and verb phrase. Then you turn your noun phrase into a determiner, adjective, noun. You can duplicate your adjective. Then you change your verb phrase into a verb noun phrase. And finally, you change your noun phrase into a determiner, adjective, and noun. Now, there's a one-to-one correspondence between every word in the sentence and all of our terminals. And that's how we generate the grammar for the sentence. This type of grammar is logical because it represents if a computer is trying to determine if a sentence in the language is grammatically correct. Very advanced learners and native speakers of a language don't treat the language like a logic puzzle, however. They treat it like a pattern. In other words, they don't say what is right, they say what sounds right. And they stop consciously thinking about the language and instead learn by regurgitating sentences that they come across. So instead of using solid grammatical rules, they become sloppier thinkers, and this sloppiness liquefies their speech so that they speak more like a fluid, speaking more fluently. It seems like in order to speak like a native, you have to think less logically. If you're watching this video, chances are it was recommended to you by the YouTube algorithm. And a free way of recommending this video to other people is by hitting the like button. If you are not recommended this video, then chances are you are already one of my subscribers. And something all of my subscribers know is that I don't upload that very often. So that makes it all the more important to not only subscribe, but hit the bell icon to get notified whenever I upload. One final thing. Behind the scenes, I have been working on a YouTube video for, not even exaggerating when I say this, 2 entire years. I started writing this document in July of 2024. I probably had a rough draft done in a couple months, but I spent the rest of the time polishing it and perfecting it and making sure that all of the wording is as perfect as possible. It's going to be my magnum opus. It's going to be my channel trailer, and I will never be able to top this video. So I don't know exactly when it's going to be uploaded, but probably within the next couple of months. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in the next video.